Good morning, everyone. At least here in Florida, it's morning. My name is Kirill Egorov. I am a GV instructor and a GV cave training administrator, but also I'm a very avid diver. I really love diving, pretty much go and do stuff underwater every day or hour I can. And one of my hobbies is photography. And what I want to talk about today, like do quick presentation on stuff I do for fun outside of my teaching work for GV and material creation work for GV. And here I will start sharing, I guess, my screen. For last 8 or 10 years, one of my biggest passions was diving with the camera. So I started doing that really as a hobby, and I was trying to look for something else to do underwater, and then slowly it progressed into one of my main things that I do when I'm not teaching. Overall, I guess the desire to do something useful underwater stems from the whole idea of what GV or Global Underwater Explorers stands for, right? It's a group of people who are primarily explorers and active divers and people who really care about conservation of underwater realm. And we teach primarily to bring more people into this group and be able to expand our reach of exploration and conservation activities, right? But then if you talk about both conservation, but especially exploration, it's really important when you go and explore to be able to collect some data. So some form of documentation is absolutely necessary for any exploration project, because in the end of the day, without data, there is no exploration, there is no proof of existence of whatever you found, be it an amazing wreck, a new reef, or extensive cave system. So documentation is crucial because it allows to document your findings. It allows to preserve this information for years to come and offer it to different groups of people. Obviously, it's always important for divers, and it's always a joy to share a photo or a video or a map with a diver. But most importantly, really, is providing all this information to groups of people who are not divers, are not necessarily capable of doing the dives you can do. And these will be scientists and non-diving population, and sharing the passion with people who don't dive and potentially encourage them to start diving, or if not that, maybe start thinking about conservation of underwater resources. It's very important, it's also a very rewarding thing to do when you see people looking at your photos, looking at your maps and thinking, oh, I may be taking a little bit more care, maybe should be taking a little bit more care about springs in surrounding area, or maybe we need to make sure that no one takes artifacts of the wreck and stuff like that. And also, it's incredibly nice when you see your photos being used or your data being used by archaeologists, by historians, but biologists and geologists and other scientists who, some of them do dive, but most of them don't. And then access to very deep historical wrecks or knowledge about extensive cave systems that are very deep under our surface is a way to give them information, get more information from them, to know what it is you are diving at and what are the ways to protect it. So there is also a number of very selfish reasons for me to start documenting and specifically taking photos, and those will be really getting involved in interesting projects. I was diving fairly deep for many years. I started diving in 2001 really actively, and by 2003 I was doing fairly deep dives in the Black Sea and in the Red Sea. It was very hard. I always was hearing, there is this project and there's that project, and then you're trying to get to these amazing events, and typically it's really hard to join tight group of people who are friends who are doing something exciting underwater. And then I was talking to a good friend of mine, and coincidentally my boss, Jared Jablonski, and I was just saying, I really would like to go diving and join some projects and do something that's not your normal fun dive, Saturday night or Wednesday night. And for some reason, I cannot really get my way into these projects. And Jared said, what can you do? And I said, no, I'm a pretty decent diver. I can go deep. I can go far in a cave. And, reply was really, what can you really do? And getting into that discussion, I realized that without having a specific skill, you can be really the best diver on planet Earth, but if you cannot bring something to the project, if you cannot really offer some specific skill, then you're not necessarily a necessity for that diving group. And that's where I decided I started looking at what can I do, what type of documentation may be interesting, or what would I like to do, and slowly going from videography, where I found it's a little bit tedious to write a script and do filming and then edit on the back end of that process, or survey, which is still an amazing thing to do, and I really love surveying the cave, but at the same time, again, it's a lot of data gathering, a lot of data processing, so it's a really long process between getting survey done and then releasing final map. And then if you look around, there are few people who do an amazing job of producing these maps, and getting to the point where you can compare your the work you do with people who do it for years. It's a long process. And then my father is an artist. My father is a very, very avid photographer. My grandfather used to be a photographer, so I always was around photography. And that's why I kind of started looking into that direction. And then I realized that I kind of really enjoying it, because one, you can pretend to be artistic at a very low or relatively low entry cost, right? You can create the shot you see. You can present the cave or the wreck or the reef or whatever have you in your specific way, which is absolutely unique, and that's a good way to express yourself. I also enjoy the fact that the time between you taking the shot and you being able to share the shot is relatively short. So it's nice to kind of do a big dive on Sunday night or Saturday night and then process the photo, and almost immediately being able to share it with your team, with participants of the dive, but also on social media and also with magazines or a webpage if they're interested in that. It also interesting, I found over last few years especially, that photos are something that is very much in high demand among scientific publications, because again, unlike video, which is always spectacular and nice to watch, but video cannot be inserted into a scientific report, video cannot be published in a magazine, video cannot be used for a scientific article or a scientific presentation. So photos are much easier to be used, and then it means that I'm getting more and more contact with different scientific bodies, both in archaeological field and in a geological field, where people take photos because they can use them, and then as a benefit, or actually several benefits of doing that, you always get new connections. So sometimes you just get more information about the site you're diving. Sometimes you're getting access to a new site where these scientists are interested in getting documentation. And it's same as artistic aspect goes. Some of the access we recently get as a team locally here in North Central Florida is due to the fact that people saw my photos and they said, oh, we have a sinkhole on our private property and we would really like to know what's there, and would really like to have a map and a couple photos so we can kind of show it to our friends, we can keep it in our house, so and just literally to know what's down there under our feet. And that granted access to quite a few really interesting sites that we sometimes even didn't know, and in some cases we knew but couldn't get access otherwise. So kind of putting this work in taking these photos paid off in access to new caves, which is obviously amazing. And it's amazing because it gives you a chance to freeze this moment, freeze this dive, freeze this event in time forever. And it becomes more and more important because while we're gaining access to some new sites, we also tend to lose access sometimes. And here, again, in our area around High Springs, about 3-hour radius around High Springs, Florida, we lost access to a few amazing caves lately. And again, it's sad, but it's important that I still have a very big library of images from those caves. So assuming next generation of technical and cave divers will not get access to those, at least they can have access to that photo library and get some understanding of how it looks and what is there, and maybe fight for that access, just being encouraged by seeing these amazing sites. And then quite often, as my photography goes, at least in pre-COVID times, I used to be fairly often invited to speak at different events. And typically all of our conversations with organizers were kind of circling around a request to talk about extreme photography. So they tend to call what I'm doing extreme, though I don't really like this classification. I don't think about my dives as extreme or my photos as extreme. I would really just like to talk about them as like photos taken at technically complex dive sites, and then can be just deep ocean dives on wrecks or pretty far and deep in the cave. It's still like extreme has some, dramatic connotation to me. And I tried my dives to be anything but dramatic. I really like my dives to be very predictable, almost boring, just complex and interesting from technicalities perspective. So why did I started very early looking into taking my camera far and deep? Primarily because very few people do that. So it allows you to do something that hasn't been done before, and become a better asset, I guess, to a team I'm joining. Obviously, on personal level, it allowed me over the years to see things that are almost like there would be no chance for me to go and do those dives if I had not started doing this deep photography. And it's amazing because you see it, sometimes you see it for the very first time, sometimes you see it with a group of people who have seen this place maybe a few times before, but it's still a lot of the dive sites I had the privilege to dive, as like old saying goes, there were less people there than on the moon. So that's pretty exciting feeling every time. And it's very important as well because a lot of times during the exploration or initial finding, be it a wreck or a cave, it's highly unlikely that the first exploration team will have time and capacity and ability to take images. So while there are a lot of wrecks and caves being located annually in different areas of the world, typically there are very few to none of like photos and a nice good-looking imagery of those locations. That's why it's so nice to be there, because you can provide that first ever photo taken in this location. And it's not a matter of pride, but it's a matter of like being able to support someone's exploration with some tangible result, as in something you can show, something you can publish, something you can share. And again, it's very important because in many cases, access we get is temporary or very, very limited. So we may never get back to this location, but also chances are nobody else will ever be able to see it if not for those photos and videos we are getting in the dive or two past the original exploration. And as I already said, it's crucial for scientific understanding of the region, scientific understanding of the wrecks, but also for long-time conservation and preservation of memory and knowledge. What does it take to participate in those dives? What do I need to make these dives happen? What's super important is, first and foremost, really a very dedicated team, right? Because when we're talking about these dives, most of the dives I'm talking about right now are extremely complex. They range between 6 and 11 hours. Depth may range between 250 feet or 75 meters to sub 300 feet, so sub 100 meters with long decompression. But taking good photo takes time, right? So by definition, lots of my dives in specific areas are longer than exploration dives at the same area. So I need people who are willing to be there, coping with that decompression, coping with me screaming at them, like trying to force them to reposition the lights in a specific way I like, and trying to position them in the way I like, sometimes with current pushing them into historical artifacts, just like on this photo, right? And they're trying to reposition themselves and give me a chance to take that photo I want. So I really always rely on this group of dedicated and passionate people who are willing to really deal with the long dive, deal with big depth, deal with me, deal with strobes firing their face all the time, plus really in the process completely bypassing their chance to explore. And again, most of my friends are passionate explorers, and what they would rather do is look for more artifacts, so get inside the newfound wreck and look for that maker plate, or lay a little bit more line in that new big great passage, but instead they would swim around and listen to my screams in my rebreather loop, trying to get that photo. So they're very, very, very important for me. Plus, they're always willing to help me carrying my stuff. That's great, right? I always have this awesome chance of saying, I have my camera and it's very fragile, so why don't you take all the tow scooters, all the scientific equipment, all the lighting equipment, and I'll be just here swimming around pretty with my camera and main set of strobes. Next thing, after getting this dedicated team, what's very important is that both the photographer and the team are really first-class divers, really like very divers who possess very good level of basic skills, such as trim, such as buoyancy, such as kicks, and just trim all of it, because it's very important for your safety, right? If you consider diving somewhere very far in a newfound cave, right, you'll have percolation, you'll have silt on the bottom, and obviously erroneous kick or buoyancy loss for a minute or two may result in, instead of getting a really good photo, it may result in a very dangerous overall situation. So basic skills still are paramount from safety perspective in photo dives, just as in any other type of dives. Obviously, it helps from efficiency standpoint, right? The less silt there is, the less I need to reshoot the photo, because diver was trying to stabilize and position himself in the water column. The quicker we're done, the less deco we'll have to do. And obviously, if it's very important to me, if I'm saying that I'm taking photos as a mean of conservation, as a mean of convincing people around to take care of that underwater environment, it will be kind of hypocritical to destroy that environment in the process of taking photos. So again, basic skills are really, really important for us to be there in that environment without relying on this environment for photo, right? I don't really take photos, position myself neatly on the floor and the ceiling. I also don't like my models, obviously, to use any of the natural or historical objects around them to stabilize and position themselves, which comes only from very solid foundation platform, very solid basic diving skills. And obviously, it's very important for models to make sure, and that that it's another level of complexity when you're planning a big and long dive, at depth, be it an ocean or in a cave with all the extra gear, but they also, instead of being efficient and having equipment that works, they also need to make sure the equipment looks good. They need to make sure their configuration looks good, because again, even though I'm primarily using models as light stands and scale, they're still visible on the image. I think images are boring without them, and if they are part of the image, they need to look good. What makes it more complex all through the dive, obviously, is the need for efficient communication. Yes, the deeper you are, the further you are, the more delicate the environment you're working in, the more important it is to make sure that images are being taken quickly and efficiently, without any delay that may result in additional percolation or silt. And that it means that divers need to point their lights in a specific location. It means that their strobes I mount on them, or extra lights that I mount on them for general illumination, need to be positioned just right. Divers need to be positioned just right relative to the objects I'm taking a photo of, which all comes only from efficient communication. Plus, obviously, mutual communication is very important for safety, because I cannot see what's behind me if I'm backing up to get a better perspective. And not that it never happened to me, right? Swimming into a piece of rusty iron on a wreck and reaping a dry suit obviously finishes the photo shoot and also makes the rest of the dive fairly entertaining. So models seeing that and warning me is very important, and same goes in other direction. If I see that my models are potentially getting in trouble, I should be able to warn them quickly. And obviously, finally, after you get your access to the location and you get your dedicated team that's willing to spend their time and effort and money on taking your photos, helping you to take the photo, obviously you need some specific equipment, right? And that goes primarily for diving equipment. Sometimes if you're doing open circuit stuff, photos, even shallow, will take more time, and probably shallow takes even longer, just because you're shallow and you can do more attempts at good photo. So you need more gas. Then obviously photo is an art of lighting, so very often you need way more lights and specific lights. Some great photographers like Becky Kagan and Pete Measley would use video lights. I prefer extra strobes, but all of these need to be brought down. All of those hopefully need to work as you start taking photos, and all of these need to position just right. And again, because I don't like something I can call, let's say, intrusive photography, all of these lights need to be held by divers or positioned on divers, so I don't place them anywhere on the wreck or in the wreck or in a cave. So that's obviously makes it more complex, because the deeper you go, the bigger the cave or the darker the water. Like on this image in Sweden on Mars, you maybe heard from Richard Lundgren in the previous presentation, right? You need way more light, and it also makes the whole setup more complex. You obviously need a housing and a camera, and you need, for the type of photography I do, really, you need a camera that can take a serious beating, because when I'm scootering in a cave or when I'm diving with multiple tanks deep, unfortunately, it's really hard to take really good care of your equipment as a normal person would, considering the cost. So you need something that will take the abuse, and I'm really happy with my current setup, and I'm really happy with the guys who helped me to service every now and then. And a few years ago, I had to ship it back to them, and it was missing the housing was missing all of the buttons in the backside, and they just sent me kind of surprising. They were like an email showing their surprise and how I treated a fairly expensive piece of equipment, but nevertheless, without any judgment, they just fixed it. And I actually even asked them to hurry up, despite the terrible shape of the camera, because I had a big photo dive set up. They did an amazing job of fixing it and sending it back to me. And then finally, to take that great image, or not necessarily great, but appealing image. I don't want to pretend my images are all that great. You need to be ready to to break rules, not as in that in safety rules, obviously, those are crucial for anything. And if there's a question of a safe dive or a great photo, obviously safe dive has to be a priority. I'm talking about really photo rules, because a lot of people, a lot of times would, would try and stick to what land photography is or what classic photography is, with all the golden rules, with rules of technical application in photography, with like, a thirds, like how much space a model needs to take on the image, which way the model has to look, how light needs to be positioned. All right, on one side, those are your golden rules. On the other side, all the settings rules, right? So people claim, you need to have these specific settings because that's what like a real photography is dealing with, like low ISO numbers, and then use your lighting to create all the image. And if you're trying to do something of the kind I'm doing, it's really hard to stick to the rules because you need to capture huge rooms, you need to be quick, you may have no attempt at second photo at every single location. So very often all of these needs to be broken, sometimes to represent cave better, and have a tiny model that's somewhere in the back, just a shade, so you can appreciate the size of it. And then this model having all the light on this person to eliminate and create that depth of photos so you can enjoy it. And then also you definitely need to make it memorable, you need to make it different, right? So you need to reinvent yourself all the time, right? You need to try and create totally new photo. Even if I'm going to Mars year after year because it's amazing rec, I'm trying to create a new set of photos that are not repeating my own photos from the last year. Yes. So sorry for that interruption. I don't know how it happened. But anyway, what's very important is to make sure that as you're taking this photo, you're not copying yourself. And obviously, it's very important not to copy anybody else, right? It's very important to create a unique image. And so that's a small topic I wanted to discuss with you over this Saturday morning here in Florida. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you enjoy your next presentation.